Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mum Mania UK. Today, I am joined by panelist Tembisa, or Tembi, as she's well known, my lovely cousin Frankie. Give us away, Frankie. And my lovely mummy. Now, my mum is a drug and alcohol substance. No, she told me before, and it's gone out of my head. She's a substance misuse practitioner. Sorry. Okay. I should know my mum's job role. I do now. So, basically, today we're going to be having, quite a frank, honest conversation about anxiety and depression surrounding becoming a parent, really. I mean, I don't know if any of us here experienced depression or anxiety before becoming a parent. I know I didn't, but most of us, it seems, have experienced these issues once we've come into motherhood. And we're seeing so much in the press and on social media about people dealing with this now and talking about it. And I just think we should carry on the conversation, and the more people talk about it, then the less frowned on it will be, because one thing people often feel is ashamed or embarrassed when talking about their depression or anxiety, and it's a mental health condition that cannot be helped. It's not something that you decide to wake up and become depressed. These things can creep up upon us, and I definitely think that more people should have this conversation to open up the doors for anyone else that could be going through something similar. So that's basically what we're going to be discussing today, and there could be some things that we discuss that could set off some triggers for people throughout this conversation, and I don't know when they might be said. So just to be mindful that if you don't think that you're in a place to listen to it, then you know it might not be the right time for you right now. Or on the other hand, it could be a really good time for you to listen to this, because you're going to hear perhaps like-minded people talking about their experiences that they've had, and it could really help you at this time. So I really do hope that this conversation helps somebody out there, because I would have loved to heard some more conversations about this being a bit more normal when I was going through it. So, let's just get started. And Tembi, I know that you have been going through a lot of anxiety, and it would be really interesting to hear more about how it kind of began.
I mean, I think, like when you were asking if anyone had any anxiety prior to being a parent, I think when I've done counselling a few times now in my life, and I think when I look back to how I grew up, I did suffer it. It's just you didn't necessarily see it, and you would do things to kind of mask it and things like that. But I think when I had Sequoia, I think that's when I didn't even know that's what I was going through. I remember bringing her home the first day, and obviously you're so exhausted, aren't you? And then the panic kicks in and the palpitations, because you're like, am I doing it right? How many times am I supposed to feed them, changing them, making sure they're breathing, things like that. And then, like, I remember I had a panic attack the first time I took her out.
Wow.
We went to Lewisham, and I was with my mum, and I was like, I can't do it. I was breastfeeding, so it's that whole thing of, when you're breastfeeding, how do you breastfeed without exposing your boob? All those kind of things. Is it acceptable to breastfeed? Because back then you didn't even really have spaces, where you could go with safe spaces where you could breastfeed. Think about like 12 years ago, it's crazy. So it was all those kind of things. So I think as I started going out with her and started doing things, and I think it went on for a really long time. I used to take her to baby play in Bromley, and just before I'd left the house, it'd be like, have I got this? Have I got that? What if she cries? What if she needs a poo? Like, how am I going to be able to do this all by myself?
Mm.
And I think as time went on, it just became different little things that would trigger me. So when she went to nursery and I was going to work, I had guilt for going back to work because I went back when she was about maybe like 9 months, which was quite early. And, you know, like going to work, making sure I was leaving work on, I'd have anxiety all day at work going, I've got to leave, I've got to leave, I've got to leave. If I don't leave on time, I'm not going to pick her up on time and she might be upset. And then I had anxiety about leaving work because I was a mum, you know, so there were loads of different things. And then I think it came to head when I broke up with her dad, and our breakup wasn't that great. And I remember going into her health check visit, and the health visitor said, "Oh, how are you getting on?" And I literally broke down, and I was like, "I can't cope." And she said, "You know, do you have feelings of, you know, just wanting to end it?" And I was like, kind of, yeah. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, honest to God, I don't know if I'm doing anything right for this child. And then luckily, you know, she referred me, and then I started going into counseling. But I think I've had Jaden, and it's just, you know, with each child, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. Like I was saying to you the other day, you know, sometimes I'll talk, because my kids have two dads, different dads rather, two, well, they have got two dads, two dads each, yeah. And years ago, my relationship with Sequoia's dad wasn't great. Now it's fantastic. We get on really, really well. But with my son's dad, at the moment, though we do get on, I think it's because of the pandemic as well. Everyone's going through stuff and things like. I do have anxiety when I have to talk to him, because my son has decided that he doesn't want to go to his dad's because he's too scared about bringing COVID in and out of each house and things like that. His dad wants to see him. I don't like confrontation on the best of days, you know. So I get anxiety every time we have to speak, because it's like, how do I navigate? And we've had that conversation, isn't it? You know, saying to Jake, you've got to go, but I'm panicking because when he goes, he's screaming and shouting, but he has a great time and it's his dad. So yeah, mine hasn't, I've learned how to deal with it, and I've learned how to deal with my triggers and acknowledge them, but it definitely hasn't gone away. And I think the pandemic's probably made it a little bit worse, because, you know, we were homeschooling, we were, you know, cooking every day, cleaning every day, working every day. And it's just like, am I doing the right thing for me and my children? And am I even a good mum? Especially when you maybe haven't been out of the house for like 3 days and you're like, God, I've got to take them out. And I don't, as a person, I don't want to.
Yeah. Once you go, you're fine. It's just the going.
Yeah, it's just that whole getting out and things like that. And I talked to my mum. My mum suffered it as well. She still suffers anxiety. When I was a teenager, I can't remember what it's called, but it's that fear of leaving the house.
Agoraphobia.
Yeah, agoraphobia. She has that. Even now with the pandemic, she will only go out if she has to do shopping, but generally she won't. So I don't know whether because when I was younger, she didn't really have it. It's just more as she's got older. But, you know, as parents, there's a lot of us that suffer it, what I'm trying to say, really. But that's my experience anyway.
Yeah. I didn't even realize actually that you'd gone through it with Sequoia, and I feel that from a lot of what you said, you're a very confident, bubbly, happy character, and I feel like that is exactly what you want people to see and believe. And
mask.
and this is the reason why often as women we just crack on. We've got crap to do. We just get on with it. And the problem is that when you're doing that, nobody knows that anything is going on, because I definitely didn't know. I know more now, and I might say things to you personally about my feelings, but I definitely would not have thought that with Sequoia. And I guess with my first child, I didn't have any feelings like that. Was more with my second. So with Amira, I didn't. And I think obviously we had kids within a few months of each other. So maybe I wasn't even able to sort of be any kind of support system for you, because I was going through having my own child. But I do know what you mean. I think any new parent, goes through so much anxiety, especially the first time. It's just, but I guess it can then lead to so many, you start going through that anxiety and then there's lots of different triggers that happen. But it's the mask that people put on that is the scary part, because, you know, you hear terrible stories about people committing suicide and all sorts of things, and no one knew that there was anything wrong with this person. And that's why we just got to keep talking, you know. It's just so important that it's okay to show your feelings about this, and it's not about just being strong and getting through it. You know, you don't have to be alone when you're going through these things. So Frankie, we've spoken about your anxiety, and I think that it's definitely seems, from what I know, on the back of you having your two boys. So do you want to tell us some more?
Yeah, I mean, as you are probably well aware, Danielle, it's a big family thing, especially on my mum's side. They've all struggled with depression and anxiety. I've always sort of had depression. I feel like depression is a strong word, but I suppose it has been, where I've had, you know, little bits of counselling here and there. I was put on antidepressants, but I didn't take them.
When was that?
Just personal choice. That was, must be about 10 years ago now, I think. Okay. Yeah, about 10 years. So it's always been there. And now that I have researched a lot more into anxiety, I realise that that's always been there as well. But just something I sort of just dealt with, really. But then after having my first child, after having Loki, I had quite bad depression, and I kept saying, I don't really want to be here. The only reason I'm staying here is for him. I only want to be here because of the baby. I don't want to do this anymore. And I went to the doctors, and he was actually really rubbish and just sort of said, look, you're a new mum, you're probably a bit bored being at home. Yeah. And, you know, it's a big shock to the system, just take some time. And it was actually a friend at work. I was at work and I was talking to her about it by the coffee machine, as you do. And she said, have you gone back on your contraceptive pill? And I said, yeah. And she said, come off it. She said, your body has been through the biggest change it's going to go through, and your hormones are completely different to the way they were before. She said, so come off of it. And it helped. I was fine. So I think it was a bit of a chemical imbalance after having my first baby. But
doctor just did not say anything.
No. He was really rubbish.
Wow.
So yeah, that was quite disappointing. But you know, I've had other times when I've gone, you know, before having the kids, I've gone in and I've spoken to people and they've been brilliant. So it's not, you know, it's not a case of all doctors are rubbish at dealing with depression. It's nothing like that. But I just felt he didn't handle that very well at all. And if it wasn't for that friend, I probably would have carried on taking, I don't know, maybe disconnected with the baby, I don't know. Yeah. But you know, I was just in a really low space. But when it comes to anxiety, I didn't really know much about that. I thought it just sort of referred to being nervous, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But since having Cass, well, actually probably since more the pandemic now, this anxiety is a new level. Like I've learned new things about anxiety that I just didn't even know existed, and it explains a lot of my whole life, really, especially since having the children. Things like irritability, like I'm so irritable sometimes, and I didn't realize that's because I'm feeling anxious. Okay. So I've always had the sort of, I'm going to say, normal anxiety things, you know, a bit nervous before going to a party, you know, that sort of not feeling where you're like, oh God, I feel really anxious. But since the first sort of lockdown, these new symptoms, they're crazy. I actually went to A&E because I thought I was having a heart attack and had an ECG. And they said, no, you're just having an anxiety attack. So yeah, new. new things.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. So,
You know, Francesca, you know, when you said earlier, you just said they just said you had an anxiety attack. They thought that sounds very blasé, doesn't it? They just said. Did they offer you any support or advice of what to do about your anxiety attacks?
Not really there, no, because it was a what's those? It's not A&E, but it's like a
like cell doc.
Well, it's in a small hospital, but they don't deal with, you know, if you went in there and you were having a heart attack, they couldn't deal with that. They deal with like the smaller things, minor injuries, that sort of thing. So they were there, and I shouldn't have really gone there, because she actually said, if you're having chest pains, you shouldn't really come here. You should go to A&E. But I didn't really know what to do, because I wasn't keeling over, obviously.
Was there a trigger that got you to that point? What happened before that, or did it just, you know, how did you get to that point where you were having those feelings? What happened?
It was in that period where we were allowed to do things again. So I had taken the kids to the zoo, and when I was coming home, I was feeling really stressed, and I was like, oh, I don't want to go home. And then when I got in the door, I just literally had to sit down on the floor, and I just started crying. And, you know, my partner was like, what's the matter? And I was just like, oh, I just feel really stressed. I feel stressed. I don't want to be here. And I calmed down. But from that moment, my heart was like tight. My chest was all tight, and I felt like I just couldn't calm down. And I went to bed and everything. And in the morning, that's when it started again. And it was all hurting here. And it just felt so tight. And I said, I'm having a heart attack. I'm going to die. And so, yeah, that's when I went to minor injuries.
Do you think it might have been because you'd been in so long, and then you got to go somewhere, like the whole thing was just overwhelming?
Yeah. Okay. And, you know, we all know how stressful it is getting out of the house with children. So I'd gone through all of that stress getting out the house. It's stressful being out the house with children, because they're just demanding all the time, aren't they? You know,
don't go near that person.
Yes.
And especially in the pandemic, you're like, they don't understand social distancing, do they?
Exactly. And even, you know, even pre-pandemic, you're like, oh, that's the car park, don't run, be careful over there, don't do this, what are we going to have for lunch, please eat your lunch. So it's just like, you know, a constant stress. And I think, we've been inside for that whole time, which actually was shorter than this time round, but I think it just got to a point where I felt like I was coming back to a prison with these two demanding little creatures. So it just it just felt, you know, really stressful. So yeah, and that was back in when was that? August, I think we were going through that sort of coming out time, maybe a bit before that. And I've had about 5 anxiety attacks since then.
Really?
Just at different stages for different reasons. I'll tell you about this one. It's absolutely ridiculous. And now I look at it.
No, you can't say that it's ridiculous.
I actually find it funny now, because it really is a funny story. But my anxiety seems to be stronger at nighttime.
Okay.
So when I get in bed, I have to sort of like really chill down. But then when I actually lay down to go to sleep, that's when I start thinking. And I've got this new thing at the moment about death, particularly being murdered. I don't know why, but it's just something that's playing on my mind at the moment. So I had been asleep for probably about an hour, and then my youngest one woke up crying. So I went in to sort him out, and then I went for a wee on the way back, and there was a helicopter, which we often get because we live right by the M20. So it was a helicopter, and it was flying low, and I could really hear it. And my mind went into overdrive about the helicopter crashing into the house, and like we being cut up by the blades. And then I was back in bed by this point, and I kept thinking about it. I was getting all hot and stressed, and then, you know, how you get down a rabbit hole of thoughts, and I started imagining myself being killed in a speedboat accident.
Oh, wow.
And I had a full-blown anxiety attack in the middle of the night about being killed in a speedboat accident, which stemmed from hearing a helicopter. And, you know, and I get myself stressed because I keep thinking my children won't have a mum, and
I was going to say that.
the pain and like crazy thoughts. And that was my most recent one.
It's funny you say that, because hadn't had extreme things like that, but I do have thoughts sometimes, like if I got COVID, you know, what would happen? Would I get it to the extreme? What would happen to my children? How would I set them up? Who's going to have them, and things like that? And I think what you're going through, though you're saying it is an extreme and you feel like, oh, you know, it's a bit silly, honest to God, I think there's so many people that go through that. I think where we're at the moment, because we've never really thought that we'd be in a whole pandemic for like a year, anything's possible. So your mind goes, well, if it's possible for me to be locked up in my house for nearly a year, it's quite possible that the helicopter can probably land. Do you know what I mean? Like, I do get that. I understand how your brain processed that whole thing. So it's silly. Like, I'd probably go down that rabbit hole as well, just because of where we've been for the last year.
But the funny thing is that I think when you become a parent, you suddenly do, especially earlier on, you're terrified of your child not breathing, or and then you're terrified of yourself not being there. I know I am, and I even have been having these thoughts of I'm supposed to be having a knee operation for knee reconstruction, and thinking, what if I don't wake up? What's going to happen to my kids? And I actually have gone to the lengths of writing in my laptop like a letter for them about how I feel about them. It makes me feel a bit emotional, because I've never told anybody this, even my partner, he doesn't know, but it's because I'm really terrified that something might happen to me and that I won't be there for them. So I've got this thing, and so every now and then, every few months, I'll just go in and write something else about it in the notes on my laptop. And I have been thinking, oh my God, should I have this operation? And I'm in two minds about the operation because of my mobility being a lot better. But then I also need to have an operation on my bunions because my feet give me a lot of problems. That's another discussion. But I'll keep panicking. And when you have a baby, especially, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I'm the only one thinking that. But obviously, you know, Frankie, your situation is a lot more elevated. But I don't know. Maybe it's just normal for us to feel like scared to die because we don't want to leave our kids. I mean, I suffer from anxiety, but is this normal? I mean, Mum, you're obviously a counsellor and, you know, a professional counsellor, and I know that your line of work at the moment is not necessarily dealing with this kind of depression, but, you know, from your experience, is this normal, you know, to have children and then just feel scared about dying, you know? I mean,
yeah, I think definitely. I mean, if you think about it, you know, when you're first pregnant and when you come near to your due date, I remember having extreme feelings of anxiety and panic about this isn't about me anymore. I'm not important. The most important thing is my child that's in my belly, and my life is going to change, and it's never going to be the same again, and I'm responsible for this little human being. And I think that's absolutely huge. And I think for us to be feeling that anxiety about dying and what's going to happen to our children is one of the most natural things. And I think that you'd find that sort of 99% of mothers would actually feel like that. And it's very, very common. It's just the unspoken word. We don't talk about it. We push it away. And that's the problem, that we don't talk about it. We do push it away. And it obviously, with my client group, a lot of the clients have had children. Their children have been taken away from them because of their drug addiction or the alcohol addiction. So, you know, and anxiety is a huge thing in people that have drug and alcohol issues because it exacerbates it and causes a lot more problems. So it's absolutely huge. And I would say that 90% of my clients actually have 90% of my clients have mental health issues, and that's what's made them use drugs in the first place, and it starts out as anxiety and depression because of what may have happened to them in the past or where they're at now. So I don't think we can ever underestimate how people feel and how much anxiety and depression there is out there, as you say, especially for new mums. And there are lots of techniques and things that you can do to help support people with anxiety and depression, but when they are using substances and it makes it 10 times worse, it's harder, because obviously that drug or that alcohol is going to make their symptoms worse. So it's like a vicious circle. How do you get out of that? How do you stop it? So it can be very frustrating and very difficult working with people. And also mothers often don't come into services about the drug and alcohol abuse because they're scared their children are going to get taken away from them. So most of my clients are men. I'd say only 10% of my clients are actually women because they're frightened.
Yeah.
So it's huge for women, with children.
Well, I think alcohol probably is such, to be addicted to alcohol must be just the worst because it's such a socially acceptable thing. It's actually, some people almost feel like it's a bit weird if you go out to dinner and you don't have a glass of wine to stop.
Exactly. Whereas shooting up some heroin is just not socially acceptable and shameful, so that's a whole different ball game.
But I think loads of times as mums where we're just like, oh, have a glass of wine, take the edge off, and can you just see the downhill spiral from that? Because if I did that every single time to take the edge off, then I just don't keep wine like that anyway. And I don't think I have an addictive personality particularly, and also wine and alcohol, the next day, even if I just have a glass and a half, I feel it the next day, so I'm less inclined to drink that much. However, occasionally there have been times in the lockdown where I've just been and in that moment, but you can actually see how that can so easily become your go-to to feel a bit better every night, and how
your crutch.
Yeah. That line,
take away the edge.
Taking the edge off is the exact problem, isn't it? That's because it does that. People use it to take the edge off all the time. Imagine how many edges people have, and if they're trying to take those off all the time, that's when it becomes a problem. Definitely. But I limit my alcohol so much. I barely have any because it's the next day I cry all day.
Really?
It's just
one, even if you just have one.
Yeah.
Well, it is a depressant, alcohol, and if you drink it regularly, it will make your anxiety 10 times worse. So it's really not, alcohol's the worst thing in regards to that. I think.
Say that because I think last year's pandemic, I didn't drink every night, but I did drink. I don't drink wine anymore because I realised it was a trigger to depression. So if I drink wine, the next day I'll wake up and for the whole week I'll just be crying. I'd feel awful. So I've gone to gin. And I was like, gin's great. I can wake up the next day and I feel completely fine. And then I think I had to, there was a point where I think I had antibiotics or something and I had to stop drinking for a week. And that week I felt awful, like absolutely awful. And I was like to my mum, I don't feel well. I just feel awful. Maybe it's the antibiotics. And she went, maybe it's just the fact that you've stopped drinking where you've been drinking the gin every single day and your body's now trying to function. Do you know what I mean? It's become so used to it that now it's trying to function without it. So after that, I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to make this a problem because I obsess about stuff. I don't know whether it's an addictive personality or not, but I do become quite obsessive. So I didn't want to kind of go, oh, once I'm off the antibiotics, I'm going to drink again. So I've learned how to kind of tailor it down, but also with drinking, I always find you have to be so careful because like I'm kind of glad we're in the pandemic because I used to go out and like binge drink.
Yeah.
Go out and you'd be like, go to the bar with your mates and you'd be like, it's almost the unsaid word of, let's see how many drinks we can get in before we go home and have to deal with the kids, or, you know, the next day and stuff like that, which is equally unhealthy, because the knock-on effect, we're not young anymore, the knock-on effect the next day lasts about 2-3 weeks. For me to get myself back on an even keel and just feel okay. And in those weeks, it's the tiredness, the anxiety might pop up a little bit more, but I don't realise. I just think, oh, I'm just tired because I've been at work and the kids. But actually, in fact, when I've actually thought about it, it's the result of what the alcohol's done to my body.
And this is exactly the point as well when you've got children, isn't it? Because you can't just lie in bed with a hangover the next day. You still have to get up and look after them. So it's a double whammy, isn't it? It's just, you know, it makes it that much harder. So you know, we have to put our children first, don't we? And sometimes that's difficult because we want to put ourselves first occasionally, and we can't do that, or we feel that we can't do it. There are circumstances when we can, but we feel that we're not able to do the things we really want to do because we've got our children to think about. And as an older woman with grown-up children, you think that when your children get to a certain age and they become adults, you stop worrying about them. But I'm telling you, you don't ever stop worrying about them. You will still worry about them, and you still have anxiety and want to make everything right for them. You don't want them to be in pain. You don't want them to have any difficulties in their life. You just want them to be happy, and that never goes away.
No, I think my mum suffers with that worse now than she did when we were younger, because obviously when we were younger, we were all with her.
Yeah.
She didn't care. We were in the house. She was having a lovely time. But now that we're older, she really does suffer with it. My youngest sister went to Thailand, and she went to Thailand as well.
Keep an eye on her.
Oh
yeah,
check up on my daughter.
Yeah. I mean, she didn't see her the whole time they were there, but just knowing that she was in the same country made her feel better. She, you know, couldn't deal with the stress of, you know, Ellie being all the way over there. And
to be honest, I think I'm going to be a mum like that with Sequoia.
Yeah,
I would agree. I do think about when they have to leave me, and I just think, what am I going to do? Like, honest to God, like my house.
I've just had a baby, so I kind of think, all right, the next 18 years, I've
got to worry about it.
Each child you kind of definitely roped in for 18 years, right? So
yeah.
I don't have to worry about that just yet. I'm not really all right, yeah. Amira's gonna go off soon because she's obviously 11 going on 12. But you know, I've got a bit, you know, I've got my bubba now. So, you know.
The boys. And to be honest, the boys probably won't leave home until they're 30 anyway.
Everybody says to me, everyone sort of says, oh, you've got boys, so they're never going to leave you. I'm like, my boys will probably, possibly, get wives. And wives will replace me.
That's even worse.
But now, isn't it funny that you do think of this? Like NJ, he is, we were speaking about this the other day because one of his friends proposed to a girl in the playground.
Oh, God.
And so then he was like, he came home and he said, how am I going to get a wife? And I said to him, he said, oh no, I want to propose to somebody, and I'm thinking about who, and we discussed some of the girls in his class, this light, fun conversation, and we talked about a girl that he gets on well with, and then he said, oh well, how will I get a wife when I'm older? Because I said, really, you don't have a wife till you're older, and he said, how will I find somebody? And I said, well, don't worry, it'll be okay, you know, and I'll always be here to help you in your decision making. You know, I said, you know, you've got to go out with somebody that is a hard worker and that is kind and honest and smart and that loves you and really cares about you. And then you can, once you have a wife, then you can have your children. And he seemed really concerned about how he was going to find this wife. But
maybe that's what my anxiety about my children. Maybe it all stems from them leaving me, maybe, and that's why I worry about.
No, but you know what? You say that, that's true. It is true. Like, I'm a single mum, and when my kids go to their dads, I worry whether their dads are feeding them properly, whether they've cleaned them, like
Must be
how
so scary because you've got no control at all.
no control. You know, Danielle, I've called you sometimes crying when Jay's gone, and you know, how's he going to cope? Like last weekend, do you remember when I phoned him last Friday? He was crying, holding on to me. He didn't want to go, and like he has a great relationship with his dad, and every time he goes, he has fun. And he left me on Friday, and my anxiety was through the roof. I couldn't eat. I just couldn't do anything. And I just thought, what is the point of having a free weekend when it's just going to be just me sitting there going, is he okay? Are they okay? Is Sequoia sitting? Do you know what I mean? Like, so your kids leaving you at any point, it triggers, it 100% triggers. And though you know they're in one of the safest spaces they should be in, it still doesn't alleviate
your anxiety.
And I think even when things are good and they're good, you still, because your children are with you 24/7. Do you know what I mean? And they'll go there, you know, it might be every weekend or every other weekend, but fundamentally you are their goddess. You know, like you do it all. So when that's been taken away from you and you're no longer doing it, you're kind of like, you know, that is, that whole thing, oh, what do I do now? And it's a bit like what you said, Sarah, about what was it you were talking about? You know, it's no longer about me. Like I have days when my kids wind me up and I scream and I'm like, do you know what this is doing to me? You don't care. You know, because honest to God, and I say this to them, I'm a person.
Yeah.
As much as I'm your mum, I'm a person. There's days I'll just shut my door and I'll be like, I can't, mum. As Tembi, I can't do this. I just can't. And I'll cry and I'll be like, I'm so stressed out. And it's small things. Generally, normally before my period, like, you know, everything's what. But I do have those moments when it's just like, where's my time fit into this? Like, when do I matter? Yes, my kids are, you know, my earth, but until we find that fine balance of I'm a person and I'm a mum, you know, it's going to take a while. Like I do try and find it, but when you're a parent,
it's very difficult, but it's very important that you have me time. I remember when my children were younger and they were both living at home, and sometimes I'd be really in an irritable, horrible mood, and I know I was going to take it out on my kids. So I would say, right, I'm just going up to my room. I'm going to I don't feel like I need some time to myself. I need some me time. And I'd go upstairs and shut the door and read my book or whatever. I'd go and have a bath and spend an hour in the bath just to get that me time, because I didn't want to take it out on my children. But we get lost, don't we? We don't know. We get to the point where we don't know who we are as a person, because all we're doing is looking after other people. And it's a panicky, anxiety-provoking feeling as well, because we feel out of control, because all we're there for, it feels like sometimes, is to provide for our children. But who, you know, how you've got to look after yourself as well, and you've got to find time for yourself. And it's really important for our mental health to do that. And we're not super mums, we're not superhuman, and it's always reminding ourselves of that. And we do deserve me time, and we do deserve to go out with our friends and do other stuff away from our children. How are we going to manage that without feeling anxious and worrying about them the whole time that we're out? And it's difficult.
It is. I mean, obviously, Mum, we haven't talked about your depression. And this is really not funny, actually. This is actually could be quite triggering. We had a discussion the other day, and my mum actually said to me that she felt suicidal when I was a baby. And that's something that I didn't actually know. And, you know, do you think that your depression began after having me? And obviously you were 21, so quite young. Or did you have any feelings of that before? And then, you know, how did it feel getting to that point where you were like that low and you just had me? And I know that you really, really, really were desperate to have a child.
Yeah, I think what happened with me, I don't remember before having you, Danielle, feeling really depressed, but I remember feeling very not good in social situations, very shy, not wanting to talk to people, not knowing what to say. I've always been a bit of a social phobe, and that was always there from an early age. Not confident at all about who I was as a person, didn't like myself very much. So I don't think I recognised that as any sort of mental health issues at the time. And then when I had you, which was what I wanted more than anything in the world, and you were the most beautiful, happy baby anyone could ever imagine to have. And then after I had you, I'd gone into I'd gone into this depression, but I didn't even see it coming. It just came from nowhere. And this is the problem with some people, when it just hits you in the face like that. And you were I woke up one morning and I felt like I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to live anymore. And you were in your cot in your bedroom, playing, really happy. And I took loads of tablets. There were disalgesics, which they don't give you anymore. And I remember lying there after taking these tablets and feeling so guilty, but I just didn't want to be in this world anymore. I couldn't do it. And I rang my sister up and said to her, Mandy, I don't feel right. And she automatically came over and took me to the hospital, and I had to have my stomach pumped, which was horrendous. And then they kept me in hospital for a while, and I kept it from your dad. He didn't know why I was in there, because I felt ashamed. And I felt so ashamed about it. And I remember after a couple of days in hospital, this psychiatrist come, because they come to talk to you about. And in those days, it was like, no, I don't need a psychiatrist. I haven't got any mental health issues. I'm not mad. Go away, sort of thing. And there was a woman in the next bed to me, and she saw the psychiatrist come and talk to me. And I told him, I don't need any help. I don't need any support. This was a one-off thing. I'm fine. And the woman next door in the bed next to me obviously had heard this, and she stopped talking to me. And that made me feel so awful. I felt such a weak, pathetic person. Obviously, I felt guilty because I had this most beautiful child who was lovely in every way. How could I even thought about leaving this world and leaving her behind? What would have happened to her? Mm. And I actually thought when I spoke to you the other day that I'd actually told you in the past about it. But I know I've talked to people about it in the past. So I felt a bit guilty when I told you the other day.
No, it stayed with me, to be honest, and that was one of the reasons why it prompted me to have this conversation, because I just thought, all I know is that throughout my childhood that you really, really wanted a child. You were desperate to have a child, and that's just all I know. And I thought that if anything, you might, because obviously I'm a burns victim. I got burned by a hot water bottle being at my great-grandparents' house, which is a 3rd-degree burn on my leg. And I was in hospital for, how long was I? 6 weeks?
Over 3 weeks. Yeah, maybe longer. Yeah.
And, that I would have thought that sort of thing is something that would send your parent into some kind of depression. Mm-hmm. And also, I think that people are under illusions of when you get depressed, because even when I got depressed with NJ, he was about 8-9 months, and I remember sitting in the hallway of my flat at the time with my partner in the front room, just sitting there crying, just feeling so alone, like he didn't understand. And to be fair, he's probably much more understanding now. He's 4 years younger than me, so so I guess at the time, how old was I then? I don't know. He was still in his late 20s, and
well, in man terms, that's sort of like late teens.
Exactly.